Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be checking out Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki.
Okay.
And it's a book that's kind of shaken up the way a lot of people think about money. And so I'm really excited to dive in today with you on this.
Yeah, Rich Dad Poor Dad is really interesting, in how it challenges kind of our ingrained ideas about money. The ones we often inherit from family,
Mhm.
that we grow up with, and pushes us to question: are those actually helping us, or are they holding us back?
Right. Yeah.
And
And that's what's so interesting about this book, right? Is that it's about Kiyosaki growing up with these two father figures, his own father and his best friend's father,
right,
who have totally different ideas about wealth.
yes,
And so we're going to kind of unpack how those contrasting perspectives played out, and more importantly, what we can learn from their approaches to financial freedom.
yeah,
So we've got, Kiyosaki's biological father, who he calls Poor Dad. Right. And Poor Dad, went the more traditional route, good education, stable job. But despite that, he always seemed to be struggling financially.
yeah, and that struggle really highlights, the core message of the book.
Hmm.
I think, it wasn't about how much poor dad earned. It was about his mindset.
Right.
He believed in working for money-seeking job security
Hmm.
above all else. And there's actually a line in the book where he tells Kiyosaki, stay in school and get a good job,
Right.
which, was well-intentioned, but
Yeah.
it it represents a very limited perspective on financial success.
Yeah, and then you've got Rich Dad,
Yes,
right, the high school dropout,
right.
who becomes this successful entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So I can already see where this contrast is going to be really interesting.
Mhm.
So is his approach to money like totally the opposite?
Absolutely. Rich Dad's philosophy was all about making money work for him,
Okay,
not the other way around.
got it.
And his quote, the rich don't work for money, they have their money work for them,
Yeah,
really sums up his perspective.
yeah.
He saw opportunities where others saw risks, and he really wasn't afraid to challenge conventional wisdom.
So how did these different philosophies actually play out in their lives? Like, what did their financial decisions look like, day to day?
Yeah. Well, one of the most striking examples is how they viewed a house.
Oh, okay.
Most people, like poor dad, see their house as an asset,
Right.
their biggest investment.
Yeah.
But rich dad kind of flips that on its head.
Okay.
He says, an asset puts money in my pocket. A liability takes money out of my pocket.
Interesting.
And he considered a house a liability because it constantly requires money, mortgage payments, taxes, repairs,
Sure.
unless, of course, you're renting it out and generating income that exceeds those expenses.
Wow, that is a serious mind shift. I think a lot of us have been conditioned to think of our home as, this appreciating asset.
Uh-huh.
But when you break it down like that, it really makes you rethink things.
Yeah.
It's not just about owning something, it's about the cash flow,
Sure.
right?
Exactly. Rich Dad's focus was always on creating positive cash flow,
Yeah.
having more money coming in than going out.
Right.
He saw that as the foundation of building wealth. And that's a huge takeaway, I think, for anyone listening.
Yeah.
As you think about your own spending, ask yourself, am I buying assets that will generate income, or am I buying liabilities that will drain my bank account?
Right. So that new car, that dream vacation, are those assets or liabilities?
Yeah.
It's a question I think we all need to be asking ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, the book also talks about this idea of the rat race, right? This idea of working for money, paying bills, and never really getting ahead.
Uh,
It feels like Rich Dad's philosophy is like a direct challenge to that, right?
yes. And that's where poor dad's emphasis on job security comes in.
Okay.
He saw it as the path to stability. But Rich Dad argued that it could actually be a trap.
Okay.
You become so focused on that steady paycheck that you never develop the skills or the mindset to create real wealth.
Interesting.
You're stuck on that treadmill, working harder and harder just to stay in the same place.
Yeah, it's a cycle that's all too familiar for a lot of people, isn't it?
Yeah,
You earn more, you spend more, and you're just as financially insecure as before.
exactly.
So what was Rich Dad's alternative?
Well, he stressed the importance of minding your own business. And,
Oh.
and I don't mean, necessarily starting a company,
Right.
but building your asset column.
Okay.
He wanted Kiyosaki to focus on investments that generate passive income money that works for you even while you sleep.
Like that great example he gives with Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's, when asked, "What business are you in?" He said, "Real estate."
Exactly.
He saw the land as the real asset, not just the burgers.
Yeah.
So it's not just about what you sell, it's about the underlying assets that generate wealth.
Right. And that's where things, I think, get really interesting because Rich Dad's ideas force us to rethink our whole approach to money.
Yeah.
It's not about just working hard. It's about working smart and building a system that generates wealth over the long term.
But I imagine this isn't easy for everyone.
Right.
I mean, if it were, we'd all be financially free, right?
Right.
So what are some of the reasons that people struggle to embrace these ideas?
Well, Kiyosaki identifies 5 main obstacles to financial freedom.
Okay.
Fear, cynicism, laziness, bad habits, and arrogance.
Okay.
And he really dives deepest into fear.
Yeah.
Especially the fear of losing money.
Right.
That's often what holds people back from taking risks and pursuing opportunities.
Sure. And what's Rich Dad's advice for overcoming that fear? Does he say just ignore it?
Not at all. He uses this really interesting analogy, the Alamo.
Okay.
And instead of avoiding failure, he encourages embracing it.
Wow.
He says, learn from it. How do Texans handle failure? They shout, remember the Alamo.
Right.
It becomes a rallying cry to be even stronger.
So it's not about being fearless. It's about reframing how you view failure. Instead of letting it paralyze you, you use it as fuel to learn, adapt, and become a better investor.
Yeah.
I love that. So where do we go from here? What's next on our agenda for this deep dive?
Well, we're going to delve into one of the most, I think, intriguing concepts in the book.
Yeah.
The idea that the rich invent money. And it's about seeing opportunities that others miss and having the financial intelligence to act on them.
Okay, now that's something I want to learn more about, so let's dive in.
So welcome back to our deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah.
We just left off talked about how the rich invent money.
Yes.
A concept that might seem a bit mystifying at first.
Yeah, it definitely caught my attention. So how does someone actually invent money? Does this involve, like, top secret labs and financial alchemy?
Not quite. It's more about having a keen eye for opportunities that others overlook,
Okay.
and then having the financial know-how to turn those opportunities into profit. Kiyosaki uses the story of Alexander Graham Bell
Okay.
trying to sell the patent for the telephone to Western Union for a mere $100,000, and they scoffed at the idea, completely missing the revolutionary potential. Talk about a missed opportunity.
Yeah, huge blunder on their part. That's a perfect example of how lack of vision can cost you a fortune. But how can we, regular folks develop that kind of invention mindset?
Yeah, that's where the concept of financial intelligence comes in.
Okay.
And Kiyosaki breaks it down into 4 key skills. Accounting investing, understanding markets, and the law.
Okay.
Don't worry, it's not as dry as it sounds.
Okay, so accounting is pretty straightforward, right? It's about keeping track of your income and expenses, making sure you're not spending more than you earn.
That's the basic idea. But Rich Dad emphasized that it's about going beyond just balancing your checkbook.
Yeah.
It's about understanding financial statements, analyzing investments, and speaking the language of money.
So it's like learning the rules of the game.
Exactly.
So you can play strategically.
Think of it that way, yeah.
Got it. So what about investing? Is that all about picking stocks and hoping for the best?
Investing is about putting your money to work for you, not just letting it sit in a savings account.
Right.
It's about mastering the art of making money
Okay.
by making informed decisions about where to put your capital.
So stocks, bonds, real estate, starting a business, those are all forms of investment.
Precisely.
Okay.
And understanding markets is about having a broader view of the economic landscape.
Okay.
It's about recognizing trends, understanding what drives markets, and spotting opportunities before everyone else jumps on board.
It sounds like it's about connecting the dots.
Yeah.
Seeing the bigger picture instead of just focusing on individual investments.
Exactly. And lastly, understanding the law is crucial.
Okay.
It's about using legal structures to your advantage, protecting your assets, reducing your tax liability, and creating opportunities for wealth creation.
So it's not just about being good with numbers, it's also about knowing how to play the game legally and ethically.
Exactly.
It sounds like these 4 skills kind of work together almost like pieces of a puzzle that create this complete picture of financial intelligence.
You got it. And developing this intelligence is key to that inventing money concept we talked about.
Right.
It's about seeing those seemingly hidden opportunities that others might miss and having the knowledge and courage to seize them.
I'm starting to see how these ideas connect.
Yeah.
Let's get even more practical. How did Rich Dad actually put these principles into action?
Well, he was a master of finding value where others saw only problems. He tells this great story about buying a rundown house for a steal because it came with a bunch of extra empty lots.
Oh.
Everyone else focused on the dilapidated house.
Right.
But he saw the potential in those lots.
So he wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty and think outside the box.
Not at all. He tore down the house, sold the locks to a developer, and made a tidy profit that's inventing money in action, using creativity and financial savvy to turn a seemingly bad situation into a winning one.
That's a pretty inspiring example. It makes me think about those fixer-upper shows where they transform these rundown properties into these gems. Maybe there's a financial lesson in there somewhere, but what about the rest of us who aren't, real estate moguls? How can we start cultivating this kind of thinking?
Well, Kiyosaki stresses the importance of working to learn,
Okay,
not just working for money.
got it.
It's about seeking out experiences that teach you valuable skills, even if they don't offer a big paycheck right away.
Okay.
It's about investing in your future earning potential.
So maybe instead of jumping at the first high-paying job offer, you consider a position with a smaller company where you'll have more opportunities to wear different hats, learn the ropes, and gain a broader range of skills.
Exactly. He talks about how Rich Dad encouraged him to work in different areas of his businesses, accounting, sales construction, you name it, just to get a well-rounded understanding of how things worked.
It's like getting an MBA through real-world experience.
Yeah.
It's about becoming a versatile player, someone who can adapt and thrive in different environments. That's a valuable skill set no matter what field you're in.
Right. And it challenges the traditional notion that a fancy college degree is the only path to success.
Yeah.
While education is important, it's equally crucial to cultivate real-world skills and that all-important financial intelligence.
So it's about being a lifelong learner, constantly seeking out new knowledge and experiences that can open up opportunities down the road. But I imagine this requires overcoming some of those obstacles we discussed earlier,
Yeah.
like fear and cynicism. How does Rich Dad address those?
Oh, he uses that powerful Alamo analogy again.
Yeah.
He's saying, look, failure's inevitable. It's going to happen, but it's not the end of the world.
Right.
Instead of letting it defeat, you learn from it, adapt, and use it as fuel to become a better investor.
So it's about changing your perspective on failure, seeing it as a stepping stone rather than a roadblock.
Exactly.
But what about cynicism? How do you deal with those nagging voices that tell you can't do that or that'll never work?
Well, Rich Dad taught Kiyosaki to question those limiting beliefs.
Yep.
He encouraged him to analyze opportunities critically and look for ways to make things work instead of focusing on why they wouldn't.
Okay.
It's about shifting from a can't-do attitude to a how can I make this work mindset.
That's a powerful shift. It's about being proactive and resourceful rather than letting doubts and negativity hold you back.
Exactly. And that brings us to another obstacle, laziness.
Okay.
And it's not just about physical laziness, but also mental laziness. The unwillingness to learn, grow, and put in the effort to build a solid financial future.
It's easier to sit back and complain about your circumstances than it is to actually get up and do something about them.
Right. And Rich Dad's advice, get off the couch and get to work. He believed that financial freedom requires effort, discipline, and a relentless commitment to continuous learning and growth.
Wow.
It's about being an active participant in your financial journey, not a passive observer.
So it's about taking ownership, putting in the work, and making informed decisions. But what about bad habits? I imagine those can really sabotage your financial progress.
Absolutely bad spending habits, impulsive financial decisions, a lack of discipline. These can all derail your goals. Rich Dad stressed the importance of being mindful of your spending, making conscious choices about where your money goes, and having a solid plan.
It's like creating a budget, but more than that, it's about developing a conscious relationship with money.
Yeah.
Understanding where it comes from, where it goes, and how you can make it work harder for you.
Exactly. And that leads us to the final obstacle, arrogance.
Okay.
And this one can be tricky because it often stems from a lack of self-awareness.
It's that I know-it-all attitude that can prevent you from learning new things, seeking advice, and recognizing your own blind spots.
Right. And that can lead to some costly mistakes.
Yeah.
Rich Dad emphasized the importance of humility, being open to learning, seeking out mentors, and surrounding yourself with people who are smarter than you in certain areas.
It's about recognizing that you don't have to have all the answers, but you do have to be willing to learn and grow. This is all starting to feel like a complete financial philosophy, not just, tips and tricks.
That's a great observation, and that's what makes Rich Dad, Poor Dad so compelling.
Right.
It's not just a how-to guide. It's a reframing of how we think about money and wealth.
This has been an incredible deep dive so far, and I'm eager to explore more. Where do we go from here?
Well, next we'll look at some of the practical steps Rich Dad recommends for getting started on the path to financial freedom, including the controversial concept of paying yourself first.
Okay, I've heard a lot about that, and I'm definitely curious to hear more. All right, so welcome back. We've been on quite the journey with Rich Dad, Poor Dad,
Yeah.
exploring some pretty radical ideas about money and wealth.
It's definitely a book that challenges conventional wisdom
Right.
and encourages us to rethink our financial beliefs. But, as with any influential work,
Yeah.
it's also drawn its fair share of criticism.
Yeah, I've heard some people say it's too simplistic or that it glamorizes risk-taking and downplays the importance of traditional education and job security.
And to be fair, some of those criticisms have merit.
Sure.
The book does tend to simplify complex financial concepts.
Right.
And its advice isn't a one-size-fits-all solution.
Yeah.
Telling someone to just quit their job and become an entrepreneur without a solid plan
Right.
could backfire spectacularly.
Yeah, I can see how that could be problematic. It's like anything else, you need a solid foundation and a realistic plan, not just blind enthusiasm.
Exactly. It's crucial to remember that Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a starting point,
Okay.
a catalyst for thinking differently about money.
Right.
It's about taking those core principles, adapting them to your individual situation, and building a financial strategy that works for you.
It's about empowering yourself to make informed decisions, not just blindly following someone else's blueprint.
Exactly.
Now, another criticism I've heard is that the book lacks concrete, actionable advice. It's great to talk about building assets and passive income,
Right.
but how do you actually do that?
Yeah, that's a valid point. The book focuses more on shifting your mindset than providing a detailed step-by-step financial plan.
Okay.
It's like planting the seeds of financial literacy
Got it.
and encouraging you to seek out further knowledge and resources.
So it's more about giving you the tools and inspiration to create your own path rather than handing you a prepackaged solution.
Right.
It's about becoming the architect of your own financial future.
Precisely.
I like that. Now, another point of contention is that Kiyosaki's stories about Rich Dad might be exaggerated or even fabricated. There's no concrete proof that this person actually existed.
Yeah, some people think it's a literary device, a way to make the story more engaging. But does it really matter if Rich Dad was a real person or a composite character?
Right, that's a good question. I think the lessons and the principles are valuable regardless of whether Rich Dad was a flesh and blood individual or a symbolic representation of a certain mindset.
Yeah, I agree.
It's about the ideas, not necessarily the messenger. Now, another criticism I've come across is that the book focuses too heavily on real estate as the path to wealth. Kiyosaki seems to have a bit of a real estate bias, wouldn't you say?
He definitely does. And while real estate can be a powerful investment tool,
Yeah.
it's not the only one. And the book doesn't give enough attention to other asset classes like stocks, bonds, or businesses.
It doesn't fully address the risks involved with real estate.
Right.
Things like market fluctuations, tenant issues, or the potential for losses.
Those are all important factors to consider.
Yeah.
It's crucial to diversify your investments and not put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak.
So real estate can be a great piece of the puzzle,
Yeah.
but it shouldn't be the whole picture.
Right.
Now, despite these criticisms, Rich Dad, Poor Dad has undoubtedly made a huge impact.
It sparked countless conversations about money,
Yeah.
challenged traditional financial advice, and inspired millions to take control of their financial lives. And it's still relevant today as we navigate economic uncertainty and a changing financial landscape.
Absolutely. It's a powerful reminder that financial literacy is essential
Yeah.
and that building a solid financial foundation can help you weather any storm.
Right.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some of the key takeaways we should leave our listeners with?
Well, first and foremost, I think challenge your assumptions about money. Don't just blindly accept the conventional wisdom.
Okay.
Think for yourself, do your research, and form your own informed opinions.
Love it. Second, invest in your financial education.
Yeah.
Read books, take courses, find mentors. There are so many resources available
Right.
to help you expand your knowledge and skills.
Absolutely. And third, build your asset column.
Okay.
Focus on acquiring income-generating assets that will work for you, rather than liabilities that drain your resources.
Fourth, overcome your obstacles.
Yes.
Don't let fear, cynicism, or bad habits hold you back. Embrace failure as a learning opportunity and keep moving forward.
And finally, take action. Don't just dream about financial freedom. Start building it today, even if it's just a small step. Remember, it's a journey, not a destination. And every step you take brings you closer to your goals.
And you don't have to go it alone.
Right.
Build a network of support, find mentors, and surround yourself with people who share your vision.
So here's a final thought for you to ponder. What action will you take today to start building your own Rich Dad story? It could be something as simple as reading an article or having a conversation about money.
Right.
Or it could be a bolder move like starting a side hustle or making a small investment.
The key is to take that first step and keep the momentum going. The world is full of possibilities for those who are willing to seek them out, and the path to financial freedom starts with a single decisive action.
We hope this deep dive has given you a fresh perspective on money, challenged your assumptions, and inspired you to take control of your financial future. Thanks for joining us on this journey.
Keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.